Upon inside. Was it something I said or something I did? Did my words not come out right? Though I tried not to hurt you, though I tried, but I guess that's why they say every rose has its thorn. Just like every night has its dawn. Just like every cowboy sings a sad, sad song. Every rose has its thorn. Yeah, it does.
The true definition of a utility man. Pete did just about everything on the field, and he did it all well. Rose was the only player selected to the All-Star team at 5 different positions: second base, right field, left field, third base, and first base.
Yeah, the DJ said love's a game of easy come and easy go. But I wonder, does he know? Has he ever felt like this?
I am your father.
Could have let you know somehow. I guess every rose has its thorn. Just like every cowboy sings a sad, sad song. Every rose has its thorn.
Welcome to the 70s versus the 80s, my fellow pop culture loving babies. And if you ever jumped on your Huffy bicycle and went up to the corner store to buy your Aunt Trudy a pack of smokes because Aunt Trudy was too busy living on your parents' couch because she's trying to find herself, and the corner store sold them to you even though you were only 12 years old, then this is the podcast for you. And Aunt Trudy, why do you have to find yourself? I found you. You're on the couch. You're always on the couch. Hello, everybody. This is Wolf Man Mike on the mic, and I can talk Pete Rose all night. I can talk Every Rose Has Its Thorn all night, but I can't talk Rose from Titanic all night because why didn't she let little Leonardo DiCaprio get on the floating door with her? There's plenty of room for little Leo, wasn't there? Forget about it. And as always, I'm joined by the co-host with the most. He's pretty fly for a Bry guy. It's Brian. And in case you can't remember what Brian sounds like, Brian sounds a little something like this.
You nerdy kids that have to read stuff get the movie ruined for you.
So on today's show, we're talking about a lot of recent deaths in the pop culture world. We're talking about a baseball player who lived a very Shakespearean Greek tragedy type of life. We're talking about a basketball player that recently died that did not score a lot of points, but he was amazing anyways and changed the game of basketball forever. Then we're talking about an actor that was a very gruff father figure that we all loved. Then we're going to talk about an actor that not only voiced one of the most villainous characters in the history of film, but maybe said one of the most shocking lines in the history of film. Then we're going to talk about a man that was a singer, an actor, a helicopter pilot, an Oxford Rhodes Scholar, and he wrote some of the most popular songs that you've heard a million times, but you probably have no idea that he wrote them. But before we get into that, I just wanted to give you a little sneak peek. Next episode, we are doing An American Werewolf in London. It is available now on Amazon Prime, and that's like the most famous subscription service in the world, so you probably have it, even if you don't know you have it. So what we need from you is I'm going to leave a link for our email, and I'm going to leave a link for our voicemail on the show notes. I need you to call in, write in, whatever. Let us know what you think about American Werewolf in London. We want to hear from you, folks. Or hit us up on the socials. You will hear your comments on that episode. We need help from you. Remember, this is your show also. And if you can't wait that long and you are in the Halloween spirit, last October, me and Brian did It's a Great Pumpkin Charlie Brown listening party. We did all the specials, but we started out with It's a Great Pumpkin Charlie Brown. All we do is listen to it and do running commentary, and we're very serious the whole time. No, we're not. We're not serious at all. But what we are serious about is these recent pop culture icons that passed away. So let's get into it.
were two more friends of mine, two more friends that died. Those are people who died, died. Those are people who died, died. Those are people who died. Those are people who died, died. They were all my friends and they died.
So Brian, and you know how we always talk about how all-star games don't mean that much anymore. In the 1970 Major League Baseball all-star game, there was a young rookie catcher from Cleveland called Ray Fosse. He was, they were all excited about him. They said the American League finally had a Johnny Bench. He was going to be the American League version of Johnny Bench. And in the ninth inning, when the winning run was coming around the third baseline, I don't think he could imagine that his career was going to get changed forever, because the base runner was Pete Rose, and Pete Rose plowed him over. And the amazing thing was that they had just met the night before, because Pete Rose was having dinner with one of the Cleveland pitchers. And the pitcher's like, yeah, but I got to bring this rookie with me because I promised he'd have dinner with me. Them and their wives had met the night before. And Pete Rose's wife was sitting in the audience, and she was shocked. She was wondering why Pete Rose had run over that young, nice man they had dinner with the night before. So Ray Fosse got a broken shoulder, and his career was never really, it pretty much ended his career. He was never the same again. So starts the saga of Pete Rose. He was quite a different individual.
Yeah, Pete Rose definitely was driven to succeed. He was never the most talented player, physically gifted player. He got through on just persistence, guile, wanting to play the game, which everyone can draw a great example from that portion of Pete Rose's life, where if you're going to do something, put the effort into it, do it right, do it with pride, keep trying, dust yourself off. Then you can get into the other aspects of his life where, like, the competitiveness maybe goes a little bit too far when you are changing someone's life and you're running them over in the All-Star game, or left the game and started managing and the black cloud that followed him there.
Yeah, so Pete Rose, he's a guy, he was from, did you know he was from Ohio? So he went to Western Hills High School in Cincinnati, Ohio, grew up there. He just had a connection where his uncle kind of knew one of the scouts for the Reds, and they begrudgingly took him on and put him in a Class D minor league team that doesn't even exist anymore. It's so low. And he just kind of worked his way up from there. He was never the best player on the team, but he was always the one that would leave the biggest image with the fans, just because of the way he would sprint to first base when he got walked. And of course, we all know his head first slide. I mean, when you see somebody slide head first, you can only think of Pete Rose.
Yeah. Pete Rose had when he had, I think he actually went to jail for tax evasion, and David Letterman did a top 10 list on Pete Rose in prison, and one is that he's going to practice that head first slide over and over again until he's tunneled his way out of jail. Also, he would play Tevye, the lead in in the prison rendition of Fiddler on the Roof. Our love of David Letterman. So he lived life like on fast forward, right? Always putting out those efforts. You don't become the hit leader by not putting out that maximum effort every day, every at bat. Go to the All-Star game in 5 different positions. You don't do that if you're just kind of one of my favorite lines from I think it might be Bull Durham is when you lollygag to first.
You guys, you lollygag the ball around the infield. You lollygag your way down to first. You lollygag in and out of the dugout. Do you know what that makes you, Larry?
Lollygaggers.
Lollygaggers.
Bunch of lollygaggers, sir. He definitely was not a lollygagger, right? He was pedal to the metal all the time, including in the All-Star game, the story you started out this segment with.
Yeah, perfect example. And then I just think of Pete Rose, always one of the shorter guys on the field, but you think of his big, hairy Popeye forearms that he always had. And that he'd always, when you see him at bat, all you'd see is these giant forearms. And, he had started in the 60s, he had that cool flat top. And then in the 70s, he had the shag haircut.
Shaggy mop, yeah.
80s, he had the mullet. So he had 3 good haircuts that he looked good in any of them. And you talk about his personality. He leads the league in games played and the most hits. He has 4,256 hits. He took that record from Ty Cobb. And it just must be something about that, because Ty Cobb once claimed that he killed a drifter. So.
Ty Cobb also played the game at a full throttle all the time. So I guess it's fitting that the person that would eventually pass him in hits would kind of play the same way. I don't know if Pete Rose killed a drifter though.
Pete Rose never killed a drifter that we know of.
Not that we're aware of.
And Ty Cobb, late in his career also had gambling controversies too. So it's just a thing. I don't know. How do you feel about Pete Rose? Everybody wants to talk about the later part of his career. I kind of think of him as a great baseball player first. And then I'm like, oh yeah. And then he had that gambling scandal towards the end of his career. What do you think? Do you think he should be in the Hall of Fame or not, Brian?
So I still lean against him being in the Hall of Fame just because of the gambling connotations that he kind of damaged the integrity of the game, you could say. We're keeping other people out like Barry Bonds and Roger Clemens. I guess we're not Baseball Hall of Fame voters.
Well, Shoeless Joe Jackson from the 1919 Black Sox is, that's 105 years ago. He's still not in.
Right.
And it's not even really clear if he participated in the...
I watched the movie 8 Men Out, and I think it's still to this day not, you can't say with certainty that he was part of it, but he just got swept up in it because other teammates were definitely doing it.
If we want to talk about an athlete that was beloved by everybody, we also lost another one, a Gen Xer. He died at 58 years old, was Dikembe Mutombo. And there's a guy that when I think of him, I think of his giant smile. And what I really enjoyed about him is he was a guy, he had the big flex where he could take over a basketball game. When you think of great basketball players, you think Michael Jordan, Larry Bird, Magic Johnson, you think these guys that could score at will.
Yeah.
Mount Mutombo wasn't known for scoring. He could take over a basketball game without scoring hardly any points. Number 2 shot blocker in the history of the league.
Yeah, this most recent Olympics when Steph Curry kind of takes over that gold medal game with some 3-point shots. You think of that, and then you Jordan, Bird, and Johnson, and all of them. But it is, there's offense and defense, and we love to, we always pay attention to the offense and the stats and who's 3-point percentage, who's got the most points per game, but defense can win you a game too. And if you watch him, parried it in commercials where he would block a shot and then, like you say, he's a good-natured guy, but he had that little finger wag after blocking a shot, and that's what I remember of him.
Yeah, very intimidating.
Is this guy who looks like he's just living life and loving it, but it's like when he got on the court, he was serious. He did the hard work, the rebounds, the shot blocking, playing tough defense. Nothing that makes you famous, but helps you win games, and he would do it, and he did it, with this infectious joy about him.
Yeah, so he went from the Congo to Georgetown and then, had his number retired by the Atlanta Hawks and the Denver Nuggets where he started. And yeah, I just think of that giant smile. He's so intimidating blocking the shot into the 5th row, but then he'd have a giant smile and he'll be missed.
Definitely.
From Television City in Hollywood.
Good time. Anytime you need a payment. Good time. Anytime you need a free. Good time. Anytime you're out from under. Not getting hassled, not getting hustled. Keeping your head above water.
This is what this show's about. We just had another big loss, celebrity loss. John Amos. And he meant a lot to me because he was in three shows that really had a big influence on me. So first of all, he started out in Good Times. So he was in it from 74 to 76. He just played the father. And the thing was about Good Times is it was a show, we talked about how important that show was. It had Jimmy Walker in it, who was just a big, huge star at the time. But, it was on about the same time as All in the Family, and it was not All in the Family. All in the Family kind of seemed like it was old people. Good Times had these cool kids on it. You just wanted to see what these kids were doing, Jimmy Walker and the other ones. And then they had this dad that was just so... You'd go to the show to watch Jimmy Walker, then you'd fall in love with the dad, James Evans Sr., played by John Amos, and just an amazing job. And then, Brian, we haven't done Forever Young in a long time. Would you like to guess how old John Amos and Jimmy Walker were in the season 1 of Good Times?
Oh, so it would have been 1974. I'm going to guess that Jimmy Walker was 27 years old and John Amos was 34 years old. Even though they're playing father and son, they're only like 7 years apart.
You got. I mean, I think I had Jimmy Walker at 26, but I didn't think you'd get that. You got it. I mean, congratulations.
Correctamundo.
Yay! The first time we've got one right.
Yeah. That's our first forever where we got close.
We're gonna hang a banner in 70s versus 80s podcast headquarters for that.
So then John Amos, he got killed off on Good Times because he was Norman Lear, who was doing all these shows, All in the Family, Maude, all the big shows from back then.
Yeah.
He wasn't getting along with John Amos. John Amos wanted the other kids, Michael and Thelma. He wanted them, featured more instead of just Jimmy Walker's character, JJ. And he didn't think Norman Lear. They were doing the biggest black show on television, and it was kind of all these white executives. And Amos is like, we wouldn't act that way. We wouldn't say that. So he wasn't getting along. So they just killed him off.
Well, and he was trying to be a good, he wanted to have that a positive, strong black male role model on TV, whereas Norman Lear is just trying to sell the entertainment of it.
Yeah, and I think John Amos was just excellent on that show because he could play gruff, but then he was just funny. He'd get all kind of afraid of his wife. I thought it was kind of funny.
As all us gruff men are.
So then after that, in 1977, there was I don't know if you remember this, Brian, but there was just a huge miniseries called Roots.
Tonight, we present a landmark in television entertainment. Roots, the true story Alex Haley uncovered in his 12 years search across the 7 generations of his ancestry. After 2 years of production, we present this incredible saga in an epic motion picture. Roots, the current #1 best-selling novel, is the television event of the year. From
enormous miniseries.
Enormous. It was just I think it maybe invented the miniseries genre, but
if not, it was the biggest one of the decade. A lot of them followed. It's where we first saw LeVar Burton.
Yeah. And that's the thing. I was just thinking about that. LeVar Burton was just such a huge force on that show. You're like, this guy, if you would have told me this guy's going to be the biggest star, I'd be like, that makes sense. And then he ended up playing the blind guy in Star Trek Next Generation. And that's.
Yeah, they did Reading Rainbow on public television, which is a fantastic thing. And he's a fantastic gentleman. He's African-American gentleman trying to be, like I said, good role models for everyone.
So that miniseries started, LeVar Burton just a huge part of it, and then they're like, oh, they're going to change actors for when he grows old, and you're like, oh, come on, LeVar Burton's amazing. They can't change actors now, and then they go, yeah, it's John Amos is going to play him as an adult, and it's like, oh, okay, that might be better even. So, and then he played the adult Kunta Kinte, and he was just amazing. So that was his second big role that really had a big impact on me. And then, I'm a huge Eddie Murphy fan, Brian. We talked about it on that past episode, our Comedians episode.
That's right. You mimicked him in 7th grade, and that's when I first thought you were funny, and now I found out it's because you were such an Eddie Murphy fan and you weren't just naturally funny.
Exactly. I was just stealing his material. Nobody else was old enough to hear his material. But when people talk about Eddie Murphy, they talk about his 3 funniest movies. They talk 48 Hours, Trading Places, and Beverly Hills Cop. But I think my favorite Eddie Murphy movie is Coming to America. It's just the funniest one. It has Arsenio Hall in it. And John Amos plays the father. He plays the owner of McDowell's, and he's hilarious because he has to chase the McDonald's people off because they're taking pictures of McDowell's because for some reason they feel like he's stealing.
He's ripping it off.
Look, me and the McDonald's people got this little misunderstanding. See, they're McDonald's. I'm McDowell's. They got the golden arches. Mine is the golden arcs. Now, see, they got the Big Mac. I got the Big Mick. We both got 2 all-beef patties, special sauce, lettuce, cheese, pickles, and onions. But they use a sesame seed bun. My buns have no seeds.
Yeah. So he's just amazing in that role. And then in that movie, the other father, Eddie Murphy's father, is played by James Earl Jones, and unfortunately, we lost him 3 weeks apart from John Amos. The 2 fathers in the movie died 21 days apart from each other. So,
yeah, and that was another big loss. I've talked about Star Wars, I think, in a couple different episodes, and James Earl Jones is synonymous with that. But he also had a wealth of different roles as well, both of these kind of titans of acting to lose them so close apart, and then like you said, that parallel of them both being dads in a really underrated Eddie Murphy movie of Coming to America. It's an interesting point you bring up.
Yeah. So James Earl Jones, that I know you're not a big Star Wars guy, but the drop your popcorn moment was in Empire Strikes Back when he says, Luke.
If you only knew the power of the dark side, Obi-Wan never told you what happened to your father.
He told me enough. He told me you killed him.
No, I am your father.
It's not true. That's impossible.
Search your feelings. You know it to be true.
That big line where he reveals that he's Luke's father, that was drop your popcorn moment.
Yes.
Did I ever tell you that was spoiled for me because I was reading all the Empire Strikes Back. They came out with these little comic books. They came out with these little talking, like where they do the voiceovers to the comic book that you're reading, and they had that in there before the movie came out. So I was spoiled.
Yeah,
that would never happen today. But
you nerdy kids, that had to read stuff, get the movie ruined for you.
Yeah, it was hard to get spoiled in movies before the internet was out, but I somehow managed to do it on the biggest line and one of the biggest lines in movie history and
in the whole 70s.
And that was delivered by James Earl Jones. And Lion King, he played Mustafa. I'm not a big Lion King guy.
Yes. And I think to tie it back to early in the episode when we talked about Pete Rose, I think he had a role, Field of Dreams, yes. I think he play the he basically, in the book, it's J.D. Salinger, but I think he's playing the recluse author in that movie, if I recall correctly.
Huh.
Now I might have to look it up. As longtime fans of the 70s versus 80s podcast know, my research is usually impeccable. Okay, it isn't. But I think he's in that movie as well, and that's to tie it back to baseball. So
the great John Amos and the great James Earl Jones, we lost them both last month within 21 days of each other, and they both have iconic roles and just gave us all those great memories back in the 70s and 80s. Again, the decades that we cover with them being now 40 and 50 plus years ago, we're going to continue to lose these icons of and talented and wonderful human beings too, except maybe you could argue Pete Rose. But I digress. We're going to continue to have that, and feel free to comment if you have memories about these actors, actresses, athletes, songsters that we talk about, or if there's someone who's passed away that you think you want a 70s versus 80s recollection kind of segment on this podcast, let us know. Go to the comment section on our Facebook page or email us at the 70s versus 80s podcast at gmail.com. Or I think it's just the 70s versus 80s at gmail.com. Yeah, so Brian, today we're talking about 2 deaths in sports, 2 deaths in actors, but we're not done yet. We haven't hit music yet. So yeah, there was a titan in music that I think we'll come back in the next segment and talk about.
What movies are we talking about?
Or is it the long-lost series ending to The Office?
Or is it why your exes should stay exes?
Find out on the Or Is It Movie Podcast.
Or is it the Lego movie version for Crayola?
Or is it how not to attract beautiful deaf women?
We're on Spotify, Apple iTunes, and everywhere you get your favorite podcasts.
Or is it Shared Groundhog Day?
Or is it Titty Bouncy, the movie?
I dig Bobby Dylan, and I dig Johnny Cash, and I think Waylon Jennings is a table thumping smash. Hearing Joni Mitchell feels as good as smoking grass. If you don't like Hank Williams, honey, you can kiss my ass.
Mike, we've been talking about some heavy hitters that have passed in this episode, and in the music industry, there was a heavy hitter that also passed very recently, the great Kris Kristopherson. kind of put together a game that we're going to do to kind of pay homage to Kris Kristopherson's music career. But in researching for it, I found out he was the writer of the song that you bumped into, If You Don't Like Hank Williams. And for me, that song really kind of touched base with me in the early 80s. Hank Williams Jr. did a cover version of it, changed around some of the artists in it. And being, living out in the third tier, you can even say in the rural area, didn't have MTV until like 1989. Listened to old country music. My dad's a huge Hank Williams fan. Wasn't into Van Halen and everything like the cool kids were. So you kind of felt like you were an outcast for listening to country music. But then the song comes along with a little bit of swagger, and if you don't like Hank Williams, you can kiss my ass. And it kind of gives you that little bit of pride to be a country music fan. There's some fantastic artists in that song. Didn't realize it was written by Kris Kristopherson until I was researching for this. The little kid in me, the kid that remembers it being tipped off by his uncle, who also was a Hank Williams fan, and it was my toughest uncle. So I had an uncle who was a paratrooper who made the last cut to become a Green Beret. I had an uncle who had 2 Purple Hearts, a Silver Star, a Bronze Star, the Air Medal, which you get after, when you see the footage of the GIs in Vietnam, they jump out of the helicopter and disappear into the forest. Once you've done that 30 times, you get a medal for it. He had one of those. Neither of those 2 gentlemen were my toughest uncle. But he was the one that tipped me off that there was this song called If You Don't Like Hank Williams, You Can Kiss My Ass. Fairly grateful to him. So with that personal story, let's do a game I'm going to call Kris Kristopherson or Not Kristopherson. And I have some song titles, right? There's going to be 20 points available for you. So listeners, let's see if you can outperform Mike on this. Let's see what your 70s music chops are. I've got some songs written by some very good songwriters. There will be some that were written by Kris Kristopherson. There will be some that were written by some of his contemporaries. And the first thing is that Mike will guess if it's a Kristopherson song or not. If he gets that correct, he gets a point. And then the second point is if it's a Kristopherson song, if he can tell me what artist made it the most, like had the best chart success with it. And if it's a not Kristopherson song, if he can tell me who actually wrote it.
All right.
So are you pretty clear on the rules there, Mike?
Yes. I don't think I'm going to be very good at it, but let's do it. Let's get into this.
Okay. So we're going to start off with The Summer Side of Life. A good early 70s song called The Summer Side of Life. Is it Kristopherson or not Kristopherson?
I'm going to say not Kristopherson, even though I don't know who did it, really.
You get a point. And since you don't know who it is, that is a song by Gordon Lightfoot, someone who we've talked about on this podcast before.
Oh.
Rain on the summer side of life. This love was right. There was no illusions on the summer side of life.
All right. So 1 point for the Kristopherson, not Kristopherson. Okay. So now we're going to go on to the next one. And the next song title is Help Me Make It Through the Night. Is that a Kristopherson or not Kristopherson?
Oh, I'm going to say I'm going to say not Kristopherson.
You're incorrect on that one. But you can still redeem yourself. For the second point, can you name the artist that had the biggest chart success with it? And knowing that you're not necessarily a country music fan, I don't think you'll be able to, but maybe you will.
See, I was going to say the Eagles, but I knew that was wrong. I'm going to say Waylon Jennings. I don't know.
Oh, that's a good guess. It was someone named Sammy Smith took it to number 1.
All I'm taking is your time. Help me make it through tonight.
And one of the fun things about that song, Help Me Make It Through the Night, is it was inspired when Kris Kristopherson read an article. I can't remember what magazine, but they were talking to Frank Sinatra. And they asked on to Frank Sinatra, what do you believe in? And Frank Sinatra, in a very Frank Sinatra-type answer, says, booze, broads, or the Bible, whatever helps me make it through the night. And that inspired the song title and the song by Kris Kristopherson. The next one is Sunday Morning Coming Down.
Well, I woke up Sunday morning with no way to hold my head. That didn't hurt. And the beer I had for breakfast wasn't bad, so I had one more for dessert. Then I fumbled in my closet through my clothes and found my cleanest dirty shirt.
Okay, this one I knew, that's an amazing song. I'm going to say Johnny. So it is Kris Kristopherson. I know that.
Yeah,
I think it's maybe one of his best written songs. And I'm going to say Johnny Cash had the highest charting with it because he is Johnny Cash.
He is Johnny Cash. Ding dang on both points. Yeah, Johnny Cash. So there's a fun Johnny Cash story. People probably have heard it, but we'll touch base on it again. Kristopherson, after he had left college, he had been in the military, went to Ranger School, was flying helicopters, and then he had a child who had medical condition and needed extra funds, so he would take any kind of job. He was a janitor at Columbia Records, famous for where Johnny Cash was recording in the 60s and 70s. And he wrote June Carter Cash and gave her a song to take to Johnny. And apparently Johnny Cash just threw it on the, it went with the pile and never listened to it. So then a few weeks later, Kristopherson, being a helicopter pilot, it's alleged that he went and flew and landed a helicopter on Johnny Cash's front yard. The urban legend is that he got out and had a beer in each hand to offer Johnny, but I think the truth is that Johnny Cash wasn't even home. Isn't that a very Kris Kristopherson thing? Johnny Cash heard someone else's recording of Help Sunday Morning Coming Down and did it, like he recorded it live on his TV show, and it got released and it became a huge hit. And then Rolling Stone, not even just for country songs, but any song, any genre, Sunday Morning Coming Down was 476th on their list of the 500 best songs of all time. Like you said, it's a fantastic song. It, just kind of that mournful look at life that Kristopherson's well known for.
And it's amazing that I'm so glad Johnny Cash covered it because I think it's one of the most Johnny Cash songs ever.
Yeah.
I mean, so yeah, that's a very Johnny Cash song. It sounds like it was written for him.
Yeah, definitely. So we're getting down there. All right, at home, I hope you're keeping track. Are you doing better than Mike? You're doing worse than Wolfman Mike? You can catch up if you're behind. All right. Me and Bobby McGee. Is it Kristopherson or not Kristopherson?
I mean, I think I've just always known that was Kris Kristopherson. I think it might be his most famous song he ever wrote. And I would guess it would have to be Janis Joplin. She released it when she died, and I don't think Kris Kristopherson heard her version. I think it was released after she died. I mean, or around the same time. And I don't think he heard her version until after she had already passed away.
Correctamundo.
You're absolutely correct. Her album Pearl was released posthumously, and it's the second song to go to #1 on the Billboard charts, released posthumously. The first one being Otis Redding, Sitting on the Dock of the Bay. And it was the number 11 song of 1971, Janis Joplin's cover of Me and Bobby McGee.
Freedom is just another word for nothing left to lose. Nothing. I mean, nothing, honey, if it ain't free. Yeah, feeling good was easy, love, when he sang the blues. You know, feeling good was good enough for me. Good enough for me and my Bobby, yeah.
And when Kris Kristopherson's version, Bobby is a female, and it feels like when Janis is singing it, Bobby's a male. It works. It's one of those kind of names.
I got to hear Kris Kristopherson's version.
Yeah, definitely. Listen to Kris Kristopherson's version. All right, so next we're going to go with Desperados, Waiting for a Train. Is it Kristopherson or not Kristopherson?
Is that the Eagles song? I'll say it is Kris Kristopherson. And
no, it's not Kristopherson, and it's not Desperado, the Eagles song. It is by another artist, and I'm going to give you a chance if you're the person that wrote it or the person that had the biggest hit with it. very kind of obscure country people, but one of them factors very big in the Jimmy Buffett story of Margaritaville. Some hints for the listener at home, too. Maybe you'll be able to pick up on these hints and guess one of these two artists that either wrote Desperados Waiting for a Train or maybe had the most famous recording of it. This is kind of like you asking me hair metal questions.
I'll say Kenny Rogers.
Kenny Rogers, that's a decent guess. Guy Clark wrote it, and Jerry Jeff Walker, who is famous for being on the night out with Jimmy Buffett and Willie Nelson that led to the song Margaritaville being written, was on his live album from 1973, probably has the most famous version of it.
Desperados waiting for a train. Desperados waiting for a train.
So at home, you got 3 left to catch up with Mike, who's just he's putting up big numbers on the board here. In the good old days, when times were bad.
I'm going to say no.
Correctamundo.
Not Kristopherson. Very Kristopherson-like, title and theme. Working hard and trying to do anything to survive.
Yeah, I'm going to be wrong, but I'm going to guess Marty Robbins had it. I'm wrong.
Oh, that's a good guess. You're wrong. It's a good guess. Dolly Parton.
Ooh.
And when asked about it, it's one of her favorite songs, and she says, "I love the lessons I got from growing up in poverty, but I don't want to ever go back there again."
We've gone to bed hungry many nights in the past, in the good old days, when times were bad.
And it's like, hey, that's right, take the lessons, but do it as best you can. Leaves us with our last one. So drum roll, please. Me and Paul.
Sounds like too much like me and Bobby McGee, so I'll say no, it's not a Kris Kristopherson.
You are correct. It is not Kristopherson, so you get a point for that. And so then who wrote Me and Paul? Famous for a line in there of, if you don't want people to catch stuff in your clothes, don't leave your contraband in your clothes line in it, or something to that effect. That's a hint for who possibly could have wrote Me and Paul.
I'll say Art Garfunkel and Paul Simon.
I'll give you another hint just to try to get you one more point so you can beat the listeners. The last living member of the supergroup, the Highwaymen.
So it's got to be last living one.
And this person's 91 years old.
Waylon Jennings?
No, Waylon Jennings has passed.
Oh, it's Willie Nelson.
Yeah, Willie Nelson. Yeah, Willie Nelson wrote Me and Paul. Very, also kind of a Kristopherson-like song. I saw that when I was researching this, that there was Willie Nelson played a practical joke on Kris Kristopherson, making him think that he was going to have to deliver a baby live on TV. So that's what weed'll do to you. We didn't touch on any of the movies. He did appear in some movies, some good movies, some flops. The original version of A Star Is Born, and an actor was his second career after his songwriting. He had the songwriting career. A lot of these songs were from the late 60s into the early mid 70s, and then it's like he started appearing in movies at that time.
Yeah, I know he was in Convoy.
I think he did like a Heaven's Gate, which was a huge flop, and that kind of stalled his movie career.
That killed his career. That's right. It was Heaven's Gate killed his career. We'll have to cover Convoy sometime. It's a movie based on a novelty song, and it's really all about CB culture. My Kris Kristopherson, I remember Sinead O'Connor, who we also had we talked about after she passed away in 1992. She got booed off the stage and at a Bob Dylan tribute show 2 weeks after her Saturday Night Live thing, where she tore up a poster or a picture of Pope John Paul II. Was it maybe? It was the Pope. It was one of the popes.
It was the Pope, yeah.
And I'll put a picture on our thumbnail, but she looks like the most alone human being ever. She looks like a 5-year-old that got left behind at the train station. She has her head down. She's staring at the floor. And then Kris Kristopherson comes up, just swoops in, gives her a hug and whispers into her ear. And you could see she got inflated a little bit after she did that. And I guess they remained friends up until, the time of her death. So just really a great moment how he just kind of swooped in out of nowhere. I watched it live. I don't know how many of our listeners watched it live, but it was something I'll never forget on live television.
Yeah, that goes to that. These songs are gritty, humanitarian songs, a lot of emotion in them, and it carries out where he's looking out for a fellow artist who's not afraid to show emotion and be gritty in her recordings, and he's appreciating that. He's like, game recognizing game.
Freedom's just another word for nothing left to do. Nothing ain't worth nothing, but it's free. And feeling good was easy, Lord, when Bobby sang the blues. Feeling good was good enough for me. Good enough for me, Bobby McGee.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the 70s versus the 80s. Keep it classy, my fellow babies. This is Wolfman Mike, and as always, I would like to thank Brian Malika for co-producing this episode. And of course, Brian Malika was produced by growing up in a third-tier suburb in the emotionally distant upper Midwest. But weren't we all?
I don't know if Pete Rose killed a drifter, though.
This is the Hood Rat Recap,
We got a great show for you.
a podcast about the best bar band in the land, man.
The Hold Steady.
Of the band that you love, we love.
We do this because we love it, but we also love that you love it. And if it wasn't for you, we wouldn't be here.
This is going to be a lot of fun.
The Hood Rat Pack has assembled.
Kevin is whatever. Kevin, how you doing today?
Stage right, Mike on the mic, and Hart. That majestic noise can only be the unified scene's very own King of Queens, Gasper.
Gasper, why don't you tell them where they can find us on social media?
Our link tree, which is linktr.ee/The Hood Rat Recap.
We're your steady stream of the unified scene, all the news and reviews.
I'm Gasper. That's Mike. That's Kevin. And us guys, and all you guys and gals. We are all The Hood Rat Recap.
Most nights are crystal clear, but